Now recording. All right, everybody, I'd like to call this meeting to order. So, the thing that we are going to be doing today is we are going to take the MVC architecture, which we finished our last class talking about, and we will, can you guys please keep it down? You're in the front row. If you're going to talk, go to the back of the room, please. Thank you. So, we're going to continue on with the MVC architecture that we were talking about last time in class. Not to mention, if you're sitting right there, everything you say is picked up by the camera, just so you know. So let's review the MVC architecture. We're going to be implementing our login credential system that we were doing previously. So let's get down to it. We of course have our traditional client. There is our client. The client is communicating with the controller. The controller communicates with the model, and the view. The model itself communicates with one of three things. It communicates with the session, it communicates with the SQL database, and it, in our case, we probably won't use it, but it can also communicate with files on the server, which are also holding data. So the model communicates with all three of the different types of deep data storage that we have used so far in class. So in our login credential system, we had 4 operations that the credential system could perform. Could anybody tell me what they are?
Are you referring to spread?
No.
Okay.
You remember the example we did where we made the login form, right? And we had the secret page and all of that. Like, what were the different operations?
Oh, register, log in,
There we go.
log out, unregistered, something like that.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah, those were the 4. So under our model, we had log in, log out, register, and deregister, or unregister, Same difference, Interestingly, did all of these operations require accessing the database?
No.
Which of them didn't? So let's go through them in order. Did login require accessing the database?
It's logout that doesn't require access to the
It's logout that doesn't require access, yes. So logout talks to the session, but it doesn't talk to the database. The other three of these, talk to the database and sometimes not the session, right? Registration did not log us in the way that we did it, so it doesn't actually set anything in the session, right? So it's like session and database, just the session, just the database, session and database, right? Because, if you're unregistering a user, that should log them out, because you should not, under any circumstances, have a live session for a user that doesn't exist, right? So those are the functions of the model that we are going to put together. We may not finish the whole thing this class, but over the next couple of classes, that's what we're going to put together, right? So let's talk about the view, right? So in our login credentials example, we had how many views? How many different pages did we see?
I think 2.
That's correct. Can you name them?
It was the login page, and then when you got in, it was the secret page.
Very good. So we had login page, and we had secret page. Those were the 2 views that we had in our previous example. As we go through, I'm going to add a third one, which is an error page, which, you know, it'll be useful. You'll see as we develop the example how that becomes useful. So let's get started. If everybody could please load XAMPP and your code editor of choice, I will do likewise. Of course, always, I have the happy accident of being in the same room, you know, twice consecutively, so I already have everything loaded. So let me just close everything down. Week 11_2. There we go. Question?
So should we work in the same directory we're working in, or a new directory? Are we gonna restart all the files?
So, unlike previously where we were essentially extending previous examples, redoing the architecture is like a super major change. We will, over the course of this, be pulling some code in from previous examples, right? But we're not going to be, like, largely we're going to have to completely redo it. Like, this was one of the, I think this was one of the ones where, like, we ended up with, like, 50 gazillion PHP files, right? The previous approach was kind of a decentralized approach, where we were roughly making a PHP file to handle every individual type of incoming packet, right? Every form targeted a different PHP file, right? In this case, MVC architecture centralizes the incoming packets, right? All packets are being directed to controller, right? So this means that the controller has to handle more cases, obviously, right? But it also means that we get to think a little more coherently and consistently about how we handle the incoming data, how we handle outgoing data. It lends itself to not forgetting error cases and that kind of thing. We'll see this as we go along. But like a good example of that, right? What data is required for login?
User and password.
Right, username and password. Are either of those required for logout?
No.
So when we did our login.php script previously, to not be supplied password and username was an instant failout, right?
Yeah.
But if the same thing is handling both of those now, not receiving a parameter is no longer an instant failout of the program, right? Because you might just, like, it might just be you're targeting a different, you're targeting a different operation, right? So, good. Any questions so far? So if we are to begin programming, it makes sense to begin at the beginning. Let us create controller.php. Create a new file, call it controller.php. Uh-oh. No, I don't want to to replace it. I want a different folder. Thank you for reminding me. There we go. Controller.php. Open PHP, close PHP. So, we are now thinking about taking all incoming pieces of data for all operations. We know we need username. We know we need password. We need one other piece of information. And that is the operation we are performing. Right? We need some way to determine which one of these is being requested. The easiest way to do that is to use another parameter for that. Although, once we start taking this and introducing the idea of REST APIs, we will find out that there's more than one way to skin that particular cat. So, let us create 3 filter input statements. We're sanitizing 3 incoming variables: operation, username, and password. Operation, filter, input, input underscore. So, obviously you should be using post, but for ease of debugging, and ease of demonstration in a classroom setting, I'm going to use get here, also because it allows me to just slide query parameters into the URL very easily, you know. So I'm going to do that, but in a real scenario, you never put the password in a get parameter, right? But I'm going to use get for this example. Input get, operation, filter, sanitize, special, chars and a partridge in a pear tree. Password, password, username, username. There we go. So, yes, question.
Is there any way to increase the font a little bit more,
Oh yeah, I can blow it up.
or maybe can you like dim one of the lights?
Oh yeah, that's a great idea.
Thank you.
Okay. Better? Good. So, with this, we have more or less handled this arrow. Coming in from the client to the controller. Now, the next thing that we need to do is to handle this arrow, number 2. We need to handle the controller invoking the correct function in the model. We can do this without even having a model. The fact that everything is so loosely coupled between the model, the view, and the controller actually kind of technically means that you can approach these in any order. Like you can sequence break this, right? There's no particular right order to do these things in. And that's a good thing because that means that you can split the tasks up among different employees or people working on a project, right? You can be the view, you can be the model, I'll be the controller. It's like, why do you get to be the controller? You know. Being the controller is hard, okay? It's not as hard as the model. That's actually true. The controller, like if you're doing the controller well, it should be the easiest of the 3. So we need some kind of code which selects the operation we are performing based on the incoming parameters. So, let's switch on our operation. We had 4 operations: login, case, log out, case, register, and case, unregister. Put my brakes in there. So, a moment on the subject of default. This is loose equality comparison being used in switch cases, right? If a string comes in for operation that does not match any one of these in any way, or doesn't exist at all, any of those cases will activate the default case. So we can easily handle all invalid operations or non-requestive operations in the same way by doing something or not doing something with the default case. At the moment, we'll just do nothing with it. Do nothing. That's not to say we won't do something with it in the future.
Like an error page?
Well, it's not necessarily an error to not request an operation, right? A simple page reload would be none of these operations, but a page reload should not do something like take a logged in user to the login page, right? Just because you're not you can request your view without also requesting an operation, basically, and that's a valid state of affairs. But this is the kind of mindset that you have to get into to wrap your head around MVC and what the controller is doing. Is the purpose of the controller is to consider all of these out of the way cases, right? It's a lot harder to do this when your PHP is decentralized and you have a different script for every operation, right? You don't have them all in a row. You're not considering this, that, and the other for all of them. Because if you structured it like this, and you're like, I should probably handle the case where the required inputs for login are missing, that will naturally lend to you to, well, now I should probably do that for logout as well. I should do that for register. I should do that for unregister, which is not the case if they're all in separate files, right? It's a little bit more mental effort to keep the bookkeeping in order. Architectures are supposed to help you, right? It's like anything. You put a little more organization work into it, but in the end, everything is faster, right? So inside of our switch statement, each one of these operations will request a specific function to be called in the model. So recall that this arrow right here is a function call, right? So let's write some function. We want to log in. There we go. Login requires username and password, obviously. Does logout require username or password?
No.
Nope, requires nothing. Does registration require username and password?
Yeah.
Yes, it does. Registration or register. Should be a verb, right?
Yeah.
Register. There we go. Username, password. There we go. And unregistering. What do you think? Say what? Sorry?
No, requires.
Oh,
Because
requires
how-
a username. What did I ask them?
The usernames should already be stored in the session, right? So we don't need to repeat it. But if the user is attempting to make any major changes to an account, and destroying the account is obviously a major change, you should require the password to act against session hijacking, right? So let's make our unregister require the password. Sound good? Now, in each of these, in some of these cases, we require certain values to exist. If any of these parameters are missing, that's an error for the requested operation, right? For username, for login operations, this function should only be called if username is not triple equals to null and password is not strongly equal to null. Because these are sanitized filters, we don't have to worry about the false case. Remember that the false case is a failed validation check, not a sanitization operation. Right? Make sense? So far so good? Now let's talk about the else case here. I'm going to probably overuse the error page, but a thing that you can, like, you know, okay, I'm gonna lay it out there. I am going to overuse the error page. I'm just laying it out there. If the parameters are not provided and login is requested, that is an error, right? So we need some way of pulling in the error page, right? Recall that the thing which communicates with the view is the template array. The template array functions very similarly to the session superglobal. Its usage is almost exactly the same as the session superglobal. The only difference is it is a local variable and not stored between sessions, right? It's not stored between executions of the PHP script. It's just a variable, but in terms of its usage, the session superglobal very similar. So let's create a template array. Immediately after we have acquired our input from the user, let's create TPL as an empty array. Then here we can say template array at error is equal to missing parameters enters on login attempt. Right? Question?
Can you just go back over like when you say TPL at error? What do you mean by that?
So, although it's been declared as just an array, in PHP, this also works for associative arrays. Remember that associative arrays are key value pairs, right? I can assign a new value into an associative array simply by stating the key and assigning a value. Basically what I'm doing is I'm setting it up so there is one place in the template array where all errors will be kept throughout everything I'm doing. That way there's one place I pull it from to create my error page. Question?
So can it be both, is there a special name for this? Oh yeah. Can it be both this and just like a regular array at the same time?
Can it be both a template array and a regular array?
No, like, can it be both associative and just like
PHP handles it a little bit weirdly. It kind of does, it does something a little bit like this. It says like 0 yields, 1 yields 2, and that's how you get to an associative array being also a regular array in PHP. So yeah, please don't do that. Please don't use it. A person on the test used that, and I got mad, basically. Because it shouldn't work, but it does. So anyway, yes. So I'd like at this point to flip tasks. Let's create an error page. This is kind of, the attempt here is to shorten the amount of time it takes me to actually be able to load some page and show it to you, because that's also like my shortest path to getting compilation started here and checking my work for syntax errors, right? Did you have a question at the back?
CPO.
Yes.
So you said the empty array is really an associative array, right?
Yeah, the template array is an associated array, yes.
So anytime, anytime there's an error, the error is the key that the value is like.
It's error message, yeah. There are different ways to do it, but this is a way that you'll see how handy it is. So let's skip the rest of the switch case for now. We'll come back to it. After we have, so this is the part where we talk to the model here. We load a view over here. So if the error parameter inside of the template array has been set, an error has occurred, and we want to show the error page, right? This translates reasonably directly into code. If is set TPL at error, include error page dot PHP. Not key hop. There we go. So now all we need is the error page itself. Recall that neither the controller nor the model has any business doing anything that will produce end user output. All of that is the view's responsibility, even so far as producing error messages. Error messages are not directly echoed by the controller or the model. They are passed to the view for the view to handle however it chooses to handle it. Okay? So let's make a new PHP file. Here we go. Save that as error page dot PHP. And I Zelda 2 reference. Now, a thing you can do because this is PHP, and because we have stored the information we are interested in the template array, we can pull that information from the template array. TBL add error. There we go. And just for fun, there he is. Error.png. There we go. Image source is equal to error.png. There we go. Boop, 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 boop. Boop. Now, if I go to localhost, you'll see I have controller error page.php. If I go to controller, all requests should be directed to controller for this to work properly. I get nothing, but that's okay. I didn't expect to get anything. I didn't request an operation, right? So if you go into the URL, type operation is equal to login. Remember that our error should show if we didn't provide the parameters. So if I press enter here, we should see the error page, but we are likely to see a syntax error. Ah, there we go. Missing parameters on login attempt. So that's working. Any questions? You want to see the code?
Yes.
Yes. Do you want to see this one or the other code?
What do you have to type?
What do I have to type?
In your,
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, let me make that a little bigger. Make sense? So because I configured it to receive the parameters via a GET request, I can just throw the query parameters in here, test out certain conditions. It's very convenient because otherwise, I think the second easiest way of doing that is like making the form and then doing stuff that way. But basically, we're doing things now in such a way that we are moving even further away from trusting the client. We aren't even we're now making assumptions like, what if somebody goes into the HTML and modifies the form they're sending me, right? Which is entirely possible. So, make sense? Any other questions? Shall we go back to the code then? Cool. So we've talked about this. This is all we need for now for the login, right? We're just using the login in the model, gating that with, do I have the correct parameters? For log out, because there are no parameters to be taken, we don't have to check if they don't exist, right? We don't have to check to see if the things that don't exist, because we expect them not to exist. And if they do exist, we ignore them. Right? So, moving on to register. Register requires both username and password, so you can actually just kind of copy and paste stuff here at this point. Copy paste the original ChatGPT. This would, of course, be missing parameters on registration attempt. And, of course, for unregistration, we have stated that we do not require the username, just the password. So just check the password to make sure it exists. Unregistration sounds a little inelegant. I think deregistration sounds a bit better, but you know, I'm committed now. So, at this stage, unless we want to start introducing more operations, this is now operation number 2 taken care of. We are now calling the correct methods in the model depending on what has come in through the incoming controller. The next thing that we need to do is we need to, if we're going in order of the way that the data travels through the system, the next thing that we are doing is we are filling in the model itself. That's item 3. So, we will require another PHP script. Everybody take a shot. I probably shouldn't actually say that. That's encouraging alcoholism, and I'm theoretically a public figure, so.
Too late.
Yeah. For those of you who are wondering, I intended it as a joke. It's probably the worst drinking game in the world, is take a shot every time you have to make a new PHP script. So this is the model.php. There we go. Baboom. PHP. There we go. So, at this point, we know what functions we need, right? These are actually called function prototypes, right? We don't necessarily need to fill in the bodies of these functions just yet, but we should make it so that each of our references in the controller matches up to something. So, function login takes username and password. Function logout takes nothing. Function login, or wait, no, I did log in. Register takes username and password. And function unregister takes just the password. Now, it's no good to define all of these functions and then never load them into the controller. So let's load this into the controller now. go to your controller, right at the top, include model.php. Now, not all of these operations require the session. But even at the level we are currently with only doing these operations, presumably, this is a login credential system for something, right? Eventually. That might require the session. And it's still useful for operations that don't actually require the session to still start and continue the session. Can anybody guess why? Why is it useful for something that doesn't touch the session at all? Like for example, register doesn't modify anything in the session. Why would we still want to start and continue the session even in that case? Yeah?
Even though you're not saving stuff to the session, you can still have stuff from the session and make a local copy.
Let's assume that you're not needing any information in it either. There's still a use in doing that. Any ideas?
What was the question?
So, why would we want to continue a session we're not using? In the case of registration, we won't be writing anything into the session, we won't be pulling anything from the session. So why do we need it? Why should we have it?
For when they log back.
Okay?
For when they log back in?
For when they log back in, can you be more specific?
No.
No? Okay. Yeah.
Like sometimes people leave pages like unattended and then they come back to it, so it's nice to just see that your session is still there, like even after you left the page, unless because sessions die like when you completely come off the browser or turn on the computer, so if you don't do that.
You're getting warmer. You're getting warmer. What were you going to say?
To track who is getting, who and where are you getting into the page?
That is true. Sessions can be used to keep a certain amount of metadata about the page access. That's a useful thing you can do. There's a simpler one though. To keep the session alive, right? When you load the session, it resets the session expiry timer, right? So that's another good reason to reload the session, even if you're not using it for anything, no matter what you do. So, a thing that you should do inside of the model, because the model is the thing responsible for communicating with the session, is session start. It should just be there, because you may need it, you may not need it, but there it is, right? Good. So, starting the session costs very, very little. Connecting to the database is a more expensive and intensive operation. If you don't need a connection to a database, you shouldn't establish one, right? So 3 of these operations should have a connection to the database. One of them should not, right? So we have some database connection code already in connect.php, which we've been using a couple of times in class so far. Let's grab that file and pull it into our current project directory. There have been a couple of versions of this. This is the basic one that just has the creation of the database handle object, right? So let's grab that, okay? Copy, paste, connect.php is now ready to go. But let's take a look. Now that we're attempting to connect to a database, we should probably create the database. So if you still have your database from previous lessons, hopefully you exported it as SQL and you still have it. You guys have your databases intact still? Yeah? Anybody not have their database intact? Okay. Quick review then. So, new database, call it something. In the last class I called it Mr. Database, so I guess in this one it would have to be Miss Database, right? Just like Miss Pac-Man. We'll make the credentials table. Number of columns 3. I never use the ID one, but you know, it's still there. The ID shall be an auto-incrementing integer, so I don't have to worry about it. I will have username and password as variable character things. Username 32 chars. Password 128. There you go. Ba-boom. Save that. Oh, ignore all. No partitioning defined. Did you still work? Looks like you still worked. Yep, you still worked. So, there we have our database. Very good. Of course, then in your connection code, you will need to modify the database name to be whatever it is that you chose for your database name. So in my case, Miss Database.
We made another connect PHP file.
Oh, this is just pulled in from a previous one that we were working on.
But we have to make one too, right?
Yeah, you'll need it because we're going to import it. But if you take a quick look around the published material on the Avenue announcement or the Canvas announcements feed, then pretty much every zip file that we've done for the last 6 zip files up there will have some version of this in here that should work reasonably with little configuration. You just should have to change the database name. Question?
Do the other database populated or do we just have to?
So we're going to start off with a hashed database here, right? So we're going to hash our password, so it's literally impossible for us to generate valid data for ourselves. So no, we're going to leave it blank for now, and we'll use the registration to populate it. Good question, though. Any other questions? All right. So. One thing that you might consider, echoing could not connect is no longer appropriate, right? This is an error and should be put in the template array as an error. So, TPL at error is equal to database error could not connect. Further, exit 0 kills the entire program, right? So we don't really want to kill the entire program, right? So, because in theory, killing the entire program means we don't get to see our error page anymore, right? So exit 0 is kind of off the table as a thing that you can do now. So, there we go. So now that we have this code which connects to the database, we can pull in, we can pull that into the relevant functions of the model. So anytime a model function needs to connect to the database, we can do that. Include connect.db, or db.php, pardon me, on login, register, and unregister. Now, I've been a bit, I've simplified things a little bit with respect to our architecture so far. I have assumed, I've had the implicit assumption that the controller should only need to go to the model once, right? This is not actually the case. If you take, for example, a standard sort of social media page, a social media site, on successful login, you will be typically presented with a dashboard page or something like it, or you'll be given your news feed or your feed of posts, right? The thing which requests the posts which will be used to populate your page, that is a different operation than logging in. You know it's a different operation because you can do it without having to perform a login at the same time, right? So the controller can go back to the model multiple times based on the success or failure of various operations. So if you log in successfully, it will go back and get you your feed. If you don't log in successfully, it won't go back and get you the feed you don't have the credentials to see, right? At least it shouldn't. So these three connect, but the controller might come back to the database multiple times, right? So a thing that we can do is, once connected, we store the connection in a global variable, and then we check to see if that global variable exists before we try to reinstantiate it. So, let's create a global variable, database handle initially equal to null, right? All of the functions that will require the database will require the database handle, so global database database handle. There we go. There we go. There we go. Now, if you're sort of thinking in advance of my cursor, the next thing you might think to do is check to see if this thing is null, right? And then, like, write a little if statement, include the connection only if it's null, right? But as a matter of fact, we already have something that will do this for us, right? We already have include once, right? So, include once connect.php. So, at this point, you're relying on a failed database connection terminating everything, right? And exiting you out to the error page, and you won't make the second attempt if the first attempt fails. that's now on you, right? But, you know, you probably want to do that anyway. So, you want to slip something in here like, if is set TPL at error, return. That is to say, exit the function if the error message exists, right? That's a way you can tell whether the database connection failed to establish, right? Now, we are using TPL. TPL is a global variable, so we will also need to import it as a global variable. I hope that this works. I'd be surprised if this didn't work. I think it does, yeah. But I'm willing to assume that it does, and then if it's a syntax error, I'll change it. So, this error checking code should also be included here. Part of what I've done this for is clarity. I believe it should be technically possible inside of connect.php to put a return statement here. But that means that connect.php now assumes it's inside of a function, which it may not be in future use cases. Right? It sort of locks it into our architecture. And as you've seen, the fact that it hasn't been locked into any particular architecture so far has been very useful because we've been able to import like almost exactly this file in a bunch of different places, right? Like you could make the argument that you're kind of doing that anyway by bringing in the TPL, but you know, so it goes. You could also make this a function, but you know, whatever. This will work, hopefully anyway. So. So now, we have to do the bit where we start filling in the model functions. We've connected to the databases as necessary, and now we need the code which actually goes out, you know, creates the statement objects, sends the queries, pulls the information back. Fortunately, we have done this already previously in class. The code that we've written previously will work so long as we modify it slightly in order to use the TPL. Right? So, let's go back to previous code that we've written. Hopefully you guys just have that on your disks. But if not, there's plenty of it that's been stashed away into the Avenue announcements feed over time. Let's see, I think login, here we go. That's a little bit shameful. Yeah. Let's go a little further back. How is it looking? Nope, that's not useful. Now we will work with it. So looking at a previous login script, we can grab the part of the code that actually connects to the database, copy that, and paste it, and then things will need to be modified. Previously, we had a query_db function, which does not exist in our connection.php, which we should be able to also grab if we grab it from the right place. Yep, there it is. Query_db function define connect. There you go, query_db. it's looking for a global database handle, prepare, success, etc., etc. Returns false on failure. Save that. So now we should be able to flop over to our browser, perform a login attempt, and see what, if any, errors we get. If this runs with no errors, it'll be something short of, it will be a, oh, wait, I just found one. We've got U and, in the previous version we had U and P. In this one, our parameters are user and pass, so we have to modify that at least. Otherwise, our parameters aren't going to be found. User, P is pass. There we go. So, save. Let's see what we get. So, login and user name is equal to Mr. Krabs. Now, obviously, our login attempt is going to fail because there are no valid credentials in the login database. That's okay. We're not looking for a valid login. We're just looking to see if it, if it compiles. And password is equal to money. Username password mismatch. Ho-ho. Looks like it worked.
So can you show me a controller real quick, please?
With pleasure.
With the controller.
Oh, controller, sorry. So, good.
Reloading on our host again.
Go to the local host, yeah, sure. Oh, here, let me put that here. This is the this is the query that I sent to get that.
So you have connect server.
Yeah, connect. Let me just give people
Yeah,
1
yeah,
minute. Connect.php.
It's not like prepared for line.
So in our little diagram over here, we have at least successfully performed step number 4. We can access the database. Right? Is there any code that anybody wants to see? What do you want? The URL? Yep. Yep. Spelling counts. If you, this happened to a student in a previous class, or in the last class. Like if you misspell the word operation, it will behave as if no operation was requested, and you'll get a blank page at this point. Yes, you will once we've, like at the moment all it's doing is echoing bad password. The next thing we're going to do is like put that error message into the template array, which will load the error page automatically. It sends you straight to that thing. Oh, database error could not connect is a different error. That's originating in connect.php. It might be because you have your database name incorrectly, or maybe check XAMPP to make sure it's running. Yeah, that's weird. the exception object contains a reference to more detailed information about the particular exception you're having. So if you do like get arrow get message, or look up the documentation to see what the method is, but you can get more information about the particular error you're having. Yes? Oh.
That's how you do it.
Go back to, no, go to connect. Because like, that's null, let's read that as null. Yeah, DB versus DH.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else? Anyone? Yeah.
You got everything to work? You got everything to work?
Show me connect stuff. Go to yeah, it's called DH here. So it's just in the same. Yeah. Is this name correct?
Anytime I play,
I'm sorry, I don't know.
on Roblox with my friends and so just go on with like voice chat or just like playing games. Yeah, I would go into audience and I just go through.
Anyone
Make
else?
sure that they don't complete it.
Okay. Oh, yes.
Yeah, just troll them. I don't do anything.
Sorry.
Other than that,
Sorry.
I'm like basically
Oh, yeah. There you go. So, currently we can't really do anything without, like, we cannot test login any further because we have no registered users and we can't register them without a registration function. But what we can do is we can take the login function and hook up the error states into our template array so that they show up as the error page loading. This is what I mean when I say the error page is going to be a little bit overzealous. Things that you might, I know, right? Things that you might have as return me to the login page, please. The way we're setting things up, simply you'll get the error page when you expect it and you'll have to like do the back. You know, you'll have to click back to get back to the previous page to try your login credentials again, which is fine, actually. It's the way things used to work, but, you know, people expect a more fluid user experience these days. So there's connect.php. Let's go for the model. So where we have these echo statements, we will want to write them into the TPL as errors. Error, username, password mismatch. That's also a username, password mismatch. This quite usefully says a problem occurred, which is probably the worst error message I've ever seen in my life. Oh no, I can think of a worse error message than that, actually. An error message that tells you something that's like deliberately false. Right? Like, for example, you couldn't connect to the database, but it tells you that like
Session not story.
no, like there's a syntax error in PHP or something,
Oh.
right? That would be an evil error message. It's like, where's my syntax error? I verified it on an online PHP interpreter. There's no syntax error, but it's telling me I have a syntax error. Question. You could not find driver error? You have a driver error?
Yeah,
How do you have a driver error?
I don't know.
You told me.
Your driver?
It says, I go to get message, right? It says could not find driver. I don't know how that happens. Don't leave me there. Can't just leave me here.
What's your operating system?
You can just see like the anger symbol.
No, go to your, so you might have to go to devices and hardware, check to see for, check for driver update. Okay. No, I'm not giving you any advice because I don't want to be responsible for you breaking your computer. That's like the level that we're at right now if you're having driver issues with something like this. It sounds like your network card might want its driver reinstalled. I don't even know how you're connected to the internet right now.
Just weird that you're only gonna need
Question?
Yes.
How come we can just say TPL error equals username / password mismatch equals
So we set it up so that this is like the global place that we're dumping our error messages.
Never mind, we can just solve
You got it? Okay.
because we called this the paragraph where we called TPL error.
Yeah. In error page, yeah. So if we load the error page, well, we only get here if error is set, and it just pulls whatever value we store there and outputs it. Cool, right? So another thing that you have to be worried about, right? We need to know in the template array, did the operation succeed or fail? This will be necessary going forward, right? So on any branch here where an error exists, we should also set a success variable inside of the TPL to false, or set it to true on the branch that succeeds, writes to the session. So if this is an error, if an error exists, TPL at success is equal to false. This is an error, false. This is an error, false. This is an error, false. That will need squiggly braces. There we go. And this is success is true. There we go. Good. So that's pretty much it for logging. Let's now consider log out. So,
Can you go back up?
yes. So let's discuss the logout function then. Previously, does anybody remember what logout was? What did we do for logout?
Session unset.
We did session unset, that's right. Now, session unset returns a Boolean if the session unset operation fails. So we should report that as the success parameter inside of the TPL. TPL at success is equal to session unset. So here's a question. Why might the session unset fail?
Because it didn't log out properly?
Sorry?
It didn't log out properly?
No, we are attempting a logout.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, like, they're attempting a log out, isn't, somehow doesn't connect, and then the session doesn't connect.
So it doesn't connect to the session?
Yeah,
Yeah. So
I mean, just like always drivers and connecting, I mean, something like that could, I don't know, I'm just.
no, it's absolutely valid, right? So if the session, like you'll notice we didn't actually check to see if session start succeeded, right? So we could be operating without a session right now. We don't know,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
So, like, the session not starting is extremely rare, right? But in theory, a server would have an upper limit on the number of simultaneous sessions that it could keep track of, right? So the session might fail to initialize or fail to reiterate for some reason, in which case session unset may fail, which means that, you know, if the login session exists, then you failed to log out. I don't think, I've been using computers for a number of years now, I don't think I've ever had a logout operation fail on me, you know? But we nevertheless should consider all of these eventualities. You have, yeah, logout has failed for you?
Yeah, I think, although I think it was me like screwing up like stuff with my computer.
Yeah. Oh, I'm not talking about like log out of your Windows account, like that just takes forever and often fails because background processes keep it busy. But, so,
Maybe Windows computers from like 15 years ago.
yeah.
I don't have an issue on mine, but
It's currently a problem for like accounts
Windows
on
11,
these.
then
Yeah.
I understand because I don't use Windows 11. I'll have to pry Windows 10 away from me.
Yeah, I was gonna say same here.
Yeah.
I don't want Copilot.
So let's think about logout a little bit more, right? What is a necessary precondition to logging out? What must be true in order for you to log out? Yes?
Being logged in.
You must be logged in, that's right. It doesn't make sense to log somebody out if they're not logged in. So, how do we know if someone's logged in?
If the session started,
Line 22, anybody?
session valid.
The session is not only started, but valid. So, if is set TPL at, oh wait, not TPL, pardon me, session at valid and session at valid is equal, is true, so you can just leave it there. Or perhaps strongly true. If session valid is strongly true, then you can log out. But otherwise, you can say something like error, attempt to log out user who is not log in question question mark. There you go. And that's about as much as you need for log out for the time being. Oh, and if this is the case, then TPL success would also be false.
You should comment as you go.
Yeah, I sure.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, it doesn't help me out, bro.
Yeah, I realize that's cold comfort, but you know.
Yeah.
So
It was fun though.
I'm glad that you liked it. I've been hearing reasonably positive things about L systems in particular. People seem to prefer it to Conway. So
You're
I
noticeable.
liked the Conway more, it was more
You're
interesting.
noticeable. Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope you guys liked it for a long time.
I did. I did.
You said you had fun with it.
Yeah.
I liked Conway
I had
more
fun with it. I
because-
hope you guys had fun with it.
I like Conway more just because it felt like more satisfying to solve because
Yeah.
like when I was first to look at them, I'm like, how do I do this? I'm like, oh, it's just that?
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, so I'd like to take a, let's see, how much time we have? I'd like to take a slight detour now. We've done a couple of these models, these model functions. I'd like to sort of detour into the other side of the controller, which is selecting the view. We now have enough going on in the TPL that selecting the view is now something that we can usefully do. All right? So, coming back to our controller.php, we have our loading of the error page. Now, if we load the error page, that should interrupt any other page loads, right? We should not load the error page and then load the login page, like, after it. Doesn't make sense. So, once you've loaded the page, you should be able to just exit 0, call it a day. Right? Now, if that doesn't happen, and there are no errors, we need to decide what page is appropriate for the user depending on the selected action. So, let's pull in another switch case. Switch on operation. Our cases, once again, are case login, case log out, case. What was that? Was that like a whoopee cushion or something?
No.
No. Register and case unregister. And of course, case default. So, we do different things depending on whether the operation which has been requested succeeded or failed. There are one of two ways that you can organize the code at this point. They are, in terms of computer logic, exactly equivalent to each other, but in terms of human logic, it might be one might be a little easier than the other depending on how your brain works, right? If you're an operation first, result second kind of person, basically you would put if statements inside of these cases. But if you're a results first, operation second, you would do the reverse. You'd make two cases of an if statement, success or failure, and then you do like one thing in each of these based on whether you were in the success or the failure camp. Personally, I think it's a little easier to have one big if statement than four little ones, right? So that's what I'm going to use, but you guys feel free to organize your code how you wish, right? It does have like different mental effects though. So if TPL at success we have all of these things. Otherwise, you have all of these things. These are failed operations. So we have two views, two non-error page views, right? We have the login page and we have the secret page. If a login operation succeeds, which page should load?
The login page?
If the login page, or if the login operation is successful,
Login page?
then, well, if you've logged in, why would you need to log in again?
The secret page.
The secret page, right? The whole point of logging in is to get to the secret page.
Oh.
Include secret page.php. If you have successfully logged out, what page should you see?
Login.
Right. Include login page.php. If you have successfully registered, and given that in our version of things, registration does not log you in, what page should you see?
Login page.
Login page. You see how, like, organizing it like this, all you have to do is ask yourself a series of reasonably simple questions and you can just chunk the code in, right? Again, the controller is the easy part. If unregistration succeeds, what should you see? Yes, include login page, because of course unregistration should implicitly also log you out, as I said previously, there is no way on God's good earth you should have an active session for a user that doesn't exist. Right? Obvious security flaw, anyone? I don't even know how that would be exploited, and I know that's an obvious security flaw. You know? So the default case is kind of interesting. That's just page load without operation selected, right? So this is kind of like your it's hidden away, but this is your nominal page load, right? So in this case, whether you see the login page or whether you see the secret page depends on your state. Are you logged in or not? So in this case, we pull in the session superglobal. If actually, we can pull in the thing from the login check, make it a little easy on ourselves. This guy. If is set session valid and session valid is true, strongly true, we include secret page.php. otherwise, we are not dealing with a validated user, and therefore we should require them to validate. Login page.php. Does that make sense? You see how this is like pretty clear and reasonable and readable? You know? The controller, if nothing else, should be clear, reasonable, and readable. Right? So now let's consider operation failure. So if a login operation fails, what should the user see?
Error page.
In our case, we're doing an error page, yes. But that's like,
Back to the login page and say something went wrong.
yeah, we should probably go back to the login page. I said that we made the error page a little bit overzealous. Normally, if you have bad credentials, it just reprompts you rather than sticking you on a separate page. At the moment, all we have to do to flop from one mode to the other is to go into the model and remove the error that's reported, right? We can do that at a later date. So, if you didn't successfully log in, you should be asked to log in again. Include login page.php. If you unsuccessfully logged out, what should you see? The secret page, that's right, because you're still in protected mode. And if you failed to log out, you are still logged in, and a logged in user should never see the login page, right? Because they are logged in. So, secret page. .php. If new user registration failed, what should we see? Login page. So in our case, login page also is the registration page, so you know. And then unregister. Well, if we unsuccessfully unregistered, then we're basically in the same boat as not having logged out. So yes, the secret page. Okay. And default can't really fail, right? There's no operation, so there's no successor failure condition. So just to be on the safe side, I'm just going to copy this code, put it down here. That way we have our bases covered. Right. The other thing you could do is like leave the default case out, check to see if operation is null at the top, and do one of these two things if operation is null. Again, there are 50 million ways that you can put your logic together.
So for the default, once you're in the session super global, when it's saying that if it's valid, are we not checking for the failed case instead of the valid case? Like if it's valid? In the default case of the switch, do you know what I mean?
So you're talking down here, right?
Yeah.
So
Sure.
the operation which failed does, like, basically if the operation failed, most of the time what's happened is you've attempted to change some state and that's not worked. So what this should look like is, well actually, you know, we might even just be able to take the entire switch case out and just use this, you know, because like if the operation fails, you should be on the page that you were on, right?
Okay.
Like no change should happen on failure, right? So I may have made things excessively complicated, right? More complicated than they needed to be, but you know, so it goes.
Good clarification.
This is kind of like, you know how perhaps you're not aware of this principle, but have you ever heard the expression, "I'm sorry, this email is so long. I didn't have enough time."
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Kind of an optional.
Like writing, like when you write, you tend to write a lot, the process of editing, you take it and you chop out bits that you don't need. That's like a majority of the editing process is removing redundancy, right? Same thing with code, right? This may be a redundant construction. We could probably tighten it up quite a lot, but if it works, it's good enough for a demonstration, right? And if it works, it's good enough for an assignment. I will reiterate, though, the reason that you want your code to be short. It minimizes the number of points in the code where bugs can live, right? Think of your code as being a great big pile of fallen leaves in the fall. You know, the fewer leaves there are in the pile, the fewer leaves there are that slugs can hide under. So from here, we might make some views, right? I think we could probably spin up the login page at least before class ends. So, new PHP file, take a shot. Viewers at home, of course, only. This will be hello, login page.php. There we go. Beep, bop, boo, 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 beep, beep. There you. Actually, we don't probably need PHP at all here, now that I'm thinking about it. So, welcome to a website. Include login form. Page 3, login. Log in. Page 3. There we go. Page 3. Register. Form, action, all packets are now directed to controller.php. Input type is equal to hidden. Name is equal to operation. Value is equal to login. Input type is equal to, you don't actually need the quotes. Somebody said you don't actually need the quotes, and then it was true.
So,
Yeah?
what's the difference between the type hidden and type possible?
An input of type hidden actually doesn't even appear on the client's screen. They can enable it, but they have to go into the HTML source and edit it in order to see the hidden box. So it's kind of just a way of attaching something to the form that you don't actually want input from the user, but you still have to send this anyway, right? Yeah, so it's actually a very different thing from a password. You'll see. But yeah, it's just hidden. So type text is name equals username, value equals enter a username. Input type is equal to password, name is also equal to password. Preferred, there you go. Value is, well, not relevant. Actually, this is a bad way to do it. Username, password. output type is equal to submit. Value is equal to log in. Friend. End form. So, going to our controller.php and just loading it. Undefined index, eh? But you can see that we get our login form. Undefined index success in, oh, yeah, I suppose. Yeah, okay. If is set, or if not is set. TPL. Well, actually, you know what? No. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to initialize a success variable up here. Success is false, which makes redundant like every single time we've set success to false everywhere. But you know, so you can go through and delete them now. But you know, there we go. Login. ASDF. Login, friend. Username, password, mismatch. There we go. Change your password. You don't say. Alright. So, we haven't actually done the model for the registration, and class is just about over, so we will save that for next time on server-side programming. Have a great afternoon.